Disclaimer, this channel's host has a speech impairment. She may be a little hard to understand at first, but if you stick around, you'll get used to it. And you might learn a thing or two while you're at it. Also, this channel is going to have a lot of true crime content. Viewer discretion is advised. Now on with the show.
In the early hours of April 7th, 2007, a young man was banished from his family home in Vancouver, Washington. There was no signs of forced injury, no struggle, no witnesses, and no explanation that made sense to those who knew him. His name was Khoi Dang Vu, and his disappearance would quietly join a long list of unsolved cases in the United States. Cases that rarely receive sustained public attention. What makes Vu's case especially troubling is not just the mystery of what happened to him, but who he was. A deaf, nonverbal man with developmental disabilities, whose vulnerability may have played a role in both his disappearance and why his case has never been fully resolved. More than a decade and a half later, Khoi Dang Vu has never been found. Hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm glad you're here. Today I'll be tackling the 2007 case of Khoi Dang Vu. I know I'm mispronouncing his name. I don't mean to, but I have been practicing and it just comes up that way. Please forgive me for mispronouncing his name. With that out of the way, let's jump into the case. The disappearance of Khoi Dang Vu. Vulnerability, silence, and an overlooked case. Chapter 1. Who was Khoi Dang Vu? Khoi Dang Vu was 25 years old at the time of his disappearance. He lived with his family in Vancouver, a city just north of Portland, Oregon. Here is a map to show you where that city is located in relation to Portland, Oregon. His family described him as gentle, trusting, and routine-oriented. Someone who found comfort in familiarity and predictability. Who was deaf since birth and nonverbal, and although he had significant developmental delays, reports suggest that he functions cognitively at roughly a level of a young child, though the exact diagnosis was never publicly specified. His disability shaped nearly every aspect of his life. Vu had limited American Sign Language skills and communicated mostly through gestures, facial expressions, and basic written notes. He relied heavily on family members for guidance and supervision, not because he was incapable of movement or basic tasks, but because navigating the world independently posed real dangers. He could not easily communicate with strangers, ask for help, or explain distress. In public settings, These limitations made him particularly vulnerable. Physically, Vu was small in stature and had a noticeable deformity in his right arm and hand, which further distinguished him and limited certain activities. He often rode a bicycle when traveling short distances, but he rarely went far from home. According to his family, he did not leave his house alone at night, and he was deeply attached to his routine. Importantly, Vu was not someone who wanted to disappear. His family had planned a trip the very next day, something he was reportedly excited about. He had no known conflict, no history of running away, and no understanding of the concept of disappearing voluntarily. Everything about his personality and habits suggesting that leaving without telling someone, especially at night, would have been highly out of character. Chapter 2: The Night He Vanished. Khoi Dang Vu was last known to be home on the evening of April 6, 2007. Sometime between midnight and 1 a.m. on April 7th, he disappeared. When his family woke up later that morning, something was immediately wrong. Vu was gone, and his bed appeared unused. His bicycle, the one he always used when going out, was still at the house. So was his favorite jacket. There was no sign of forced entry or disturbance at the home. Doors and windows were intact. No neighbors reported seeing or hearing anything unusual during the night. The absence of obvious clues left investigators and family members grappling with how Vu could have left at all, let alone without being seen. The idea that he simply wandered off was initially considered, as is often the case involving adults with disabilities. However, that explanation quickly fell apart. Vu had never left home at night on his own. He had no known reason to do so. He did not take items he would have needed for safety and comfort. He had no money, no transportation, and no way to communicate effectively with strangers. Early investigative momentum appears to be limited. Chapter 3: Investigation and Early Theories. From the onset, Vu's disappearance was puzzling. Law enforcement conducted searches in surrounding areas, including waterways and wooded bases, but found nothing. No credible sighting emerged. No evidence suggested he had traveled far on his own. Over time, investigators began to lean towards the belief that Vu had met with foul play. One theory proposed that he may have been lured or coerced out of the house, possibly by someone he knew or someone who recognized his vulnerability. Given Vu's trusting nature and limited ability to assess danger, it is not difficult to imagine a scenario in which he follows someone without understanding the risks. Another chilling possibility is that Vu was abducted. His disabilities would have made it extremely difficult for him to resist, escape, or alert others. If he was taken by someone with malicious intent, the odds of him being able to survive or seek help were tragically low. At one point, law enforcement suggested that Vu's body may have been disposed of in a dumpster and transported to a nearby landfill. This theory was based on investigative leads that have never been fully disclosed publicly. If true, it would mean that any physical evidence was effectively destroyed, making recovery impossible. Despite these theories, no suspects were publicly named, and no arrests were ever made. Chapter 4: Speculation in the Israel Keys Theory. As years passed with no answers, Vu's case began to attract attention from online true crime communities rather than mainstream media. Within those spaces, speculation emerged linking his disappearance to Israel Keys, a serial killer active across the United States in the early 2000s. Keys was known as targeting victims at random, traveling extensively, and disposing of bodies in ways designed to eliminate evidence. He was active in the Pacific Northwest around the time of Vu's disappearance. In some aspects of Vu's case, sudden disappearance, lack of witnesses, no recovered remains fit the broad pattern of Key's crimes. However, it is critical to emphasize that there was no official confirmation of any connection between Keys and Vu. Law enforcement has never publicly identified Vu as a confirmed or probable victim of Keys. The theory remains speculative and largely driven by circumstantial overlap rather than concrete evidence. While such speculation can sometimes bring renewed attention to cold cases, it also risks overshadowing the victim himself, reducing a complex life to a footnote in a serial killer's narrative. Chapter 5: Disability and Vulnerability in True Crime. Khoi Dang Vu disabilities are central to understanding both what may have happened to him and why his case has been overlooked. Disabled individuals, especially those with communication impairments, are disproportionately vulnerable to violence and neglect. Yet their cases often receive less media coverage, fewer investigative resources, and diminished public urgency. In Vu's case, his inability to speak or hear meant he could not call out for help, describe an attack, or even explain that he was in danger. If he encountered someone with harmful intentions, he had few defenses. At the same time, his disabilities may have influenced early assumptions about his disappearance. The idea that he, quote, wandered off, unquote, reflects a common bias in missing persons cases involving people with disabilities, where disappearance is sometimes framed as a behavioral issue rather than a potential crime. This framing can delay serious investigations and shape public perceptions in ways that are difficult to undo. Chapter 6: Why the case is often overlooked. Several factors contribute to why Khoi Dang Vu's disappearance remains obscure. First, there is a lack of dramatic, easily digestible evidence. No surveillance footage, no dramatic glass sightings, no recovered body. Media coverage often favors cases with clear narratives or shocking visuals, neither of which Vu's case provides. Second, Vu does not fit the stereotypical image of a, quote, high-profile, unquote, missing person. He was a disabled man of color, living quietly with his family, without a public presence or professional profile. Historically, such victims receive less sustained attention. Third, the passage of time eroded momentum. As the years go by without any answers, cases like Vu's fade from public consciousness, even as families continue to wait. Finally, the discomfort surrounding disability plays a definite role. Stories involving disabled victims force society to confront uncomfortable truths about disability, neglect, and systemic failure. These are harder stories to tell and harder for audiences to engage with than narratives centered on more familiar archetypes. Chapter 7: A Life Still Unaccounted For. Khoi Dang Vu was not a mystery. He was a son, a family member, a young man with routines, preferences, and joy. His disappearance transformed him into a case file, but it did not erase who he was. More than anything, his story highlights the profound risk faced by disabled individuals in a world that is often unprepared or unwilling to protect us. It also raises questions about whose lives are deemed worthy of sustained attention and whose disappearances are allowed to fade into silence. Until answers are found, Khoi Dang Vu remains missing. His absence is a quiet one, but it deserves to be heard. Well, that does it for Khoi Dang Vu's case. I hope you found this video interesting and informative. I chose the case because I always like to have a communication problem. Although my problem isn't as significant as Khoi Dang Vu. But I still have had trouble navigating a world in which 99% of people who meet me for the first time assume I have a cognitive impairment. It's very frustrating. Actually, it's because of this I did not start my YouTube channel until recently, because I was afraid of how my speech would be taken. And that's why I do the subtitles by hand so that people don't misunderstand me. It would be really nice if you could let me know in the comments if the subtitles are helpful or if they're not helpful. My family and friends tell me I am clear and I don't need the subtitles. But I know I follow other creators with speech impairments like mine, and when they don't have subtitles, I have a hard time understanding them. So I never want to do that to my audience. So if you could just comment below what you think about the subtitles. And while you're there, let me know about this case. What do you think? Hopefully we can shine some light on this case. Well, that's it for today. If you like this content, you know what to do. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.